My name is Helen Mercer, and I'm 35. I was standing in the lobby of a beach resort in Florida, suitcase in hand, while the front desk clerk told me there was no reservation under my name, and my parents suddenly found the ocean fascinating, as if they'd never laid eyes on it before. My sister wasn't fascinated by anything. She just smiled and said, "We booked rooms for me, my husband, and my daughter. We're the actual family." I looked at her. I looked at the rest of them. Then I said, "Then I'm leaving." And I did. I switched my ringer off and let the calls stack up, 6, then 20, then nearly 50 by the time the sun went down. Nobody standing in that lobby, myself included, had any idea what was coming. Before that week ended, the oldest man in our family would rise at his own birthday dinner and speak one quiet line that brought the whole polished facade crashing down. And even that wasn't the moment that changed everything for me. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where the quiet ones finally get to talk and family secrets come back to collect what they're owed. If you've ever been the one left off the list by people who were supposed to save you a seat, this one's for you. Leave a comment and don't forget to subscribe. Let me rewind a little. I run clinical research at a biotech firm in Boston. 31 people answer to me. When a new drug is tested on human subjects, I'm the one making sure nobody skips a step. And I'm genuinely excellent at what I do. I put myself through school on scholarships, double shifts at a diner, and roughly a decade of ramen noodles. I double-check every figure. I read the fine print on everything, even birthday cards. My condo is 2 payments away from being fully mine, and every piece of furniture inside it has a receipt with my name on it. That's who I am now. My family lives in Columbus, Ohio, and they live gorgeously. That's the only word that's ever fit. Gorgeously. My sister Chloe is 38, and her kitchen belongs in a magazine. My parents belong to a country club with valet service. Not one person in my family has anything resembling a paycheck, and somehow nobody ever so much as blinks at a bill. And every single year, I flew out anyway, Christmas, Easter, every birthday ending in a 0. My assistant used to ask why I bothered, and the honest answer sits in a hospital room a decade back, where my grandmother Ruth held my hand while the machines hummed and made me promise her something I've never said aloud to anyone. I'll get there, I promise. For now, here's what matters about me. I kept returning to a table that never really had a seat saved for me, and I convinced myself that this was simply what family meant. I was the one who understood. Understanding was practically my job title in that house. Unlike my actual job, though, it didn't pay, and the hours were awful. The call came in April. My mother's voice had that bright, managerial gleam it gets whenever there's an event to stage. "Your grandfather turns 85 in July. We're doing a full week at the Sandpiper Grand in Clearwater Beach. Whole family. Chloe's handling every booking." I remember exactly where I was standing. At my office window, watching a ferry cut across the harbor. Because of what I said next, "Let me book my own room, Mom, it's simpler, I'll just match everyone's dates." "Don't be silly," she said, "it's already sorted. Chloe's got the group rate." I'm a meticulous woman. Verifying things is essentially my career. So that night I texted Chloe, was I on the reservation list, did she need my card? She wrote back, "Yep, all set," with a little grinning sun emoji. 2 weeks before the trip I asked again, because 4th of July week on that stretch of coast books up fast. Same reply. All set. So I rearranged a trial approval meeting I'd guarded for 3 months. I bought the plane tickets. I bought a sundress the color of key lime pie because it reminded me of Grandpa Walter, who ate a slice every Sunday of my childhood and let me sneak the whipped cream. I want to be fair here, because fairness matters to me. I did what any reasonable person would do. I offered to book it myself. I confirmed it twice. I have the texts to prove it. If you're listening and thinking you'd have seen it coming, maybe. But this wasn't a trap built from my own carelessness. It was engineered by somebody else's planning, and construction on it had been underway quietly since March. Here's something you need to understand about my family, because it took me 30 years to say it out loud. Nobody in that house ever talked about money. Not once. Money was like weather in some other state, somebody else's forecast, nothing to do with us. And yet comfort rained down on them daily. Chloe stays home in a 4-bedroom colonial in a neighborhood where the lawns look vacuumed. Her husband Grant, 40, calls himself a consultant. In 11 years I never met a single client, never heard a company name, never once saw the man open a laptop. He has strong opinions about wine and a boat he refers to as a project. My father's business card reads investor. My mother redecorates a room every spring the way other women buy new sandals. Club dues. Scottsdale every February. A new SUV in Chloe's driveway every other autumn, regular as falling leaves. Once, years back, I sat in my car after Thanksgiving and ran the numbers on the back of a pharmacy receipt. 2 households, no visible income between them. I tallied up what that lifestyle actually costs, stared at the total, and stopped myself. Not my business, I decided. Families have arrangements. Maybe Dad's investments were genius. Maybe Grant consulted for ghosts who paid cash. I crumpled the receipt and drove back to my hotel, relieved to let it go, the way you feel closing a file that was never yours to open. Hold on to that receipt. Hold on to the question I trained myself never to ask, who's actually footing this bill? Because the answer was sitting in a small house in Baird, Florida, 20 minutes from that big pink resort, drinking black coffee and missing his wife. And that July, the answer turned 85. I flew down the Tuesday before the 4th, Boston to Tampa, 3 hours with a toddler kicking the back of my seat, and I didn't mind, because I was going to see my grandfather. The Sandpiper Grand rises off Clearwater Beach like a wedding cake someone ordered back in 1988. Pink stucco, rows of palm trees, a lobby fountain you can hear from the valet stand. I wheeled my suitcase through those doors at 2 in the afternoon, sundress on, actually humming. I spotted my family before they spotted me, arranged around the pool bar in new hats and old confidence, tanned to a crisp. Supposedly it was day 1 of the trip. It wasn't. I'd find out they'd all flown down Monday, a full day early, and nobody had bothered mentioning the schedule change to me. My niece Lily set things off first, 6 years old, the only Ashford who runs toward me instead of glancing up. She slammed into my knees like a linebacker. Aunt Helen, we saw a dolphin and Daddy said a bad word. For 1 second, holding that sweaty little girl in the Florida sun, I thought, this is why you keep coming back. Then I headed to the front desk to check in before joining them, wanting to hang the dress up and put on sunscreen like a responsible adult. The clerk was young and kind. She typed. She frowned. She typed again, more slowly, the way people type when they're hoping the computer changes its answer. Then she looked up at me with the first honest expression I'd seen since the airport and said, "I'm so sorry, ma'am, I'm not finding a reservation under that name." I did what careful people do. I spelled it out. I handed her my ID. I suggested she try my father's name, Frank Mercer. Then Ashford, the group block. She found the block right away, 4 rooms. My parents. Chloe and Grant. A room for Lily with a connecting door. A 4th room booked under the group for a late checkout, being used, I'd later learn, to stash beach gear and a stroller. There was no 5th room. There had never been a 5th room. Could I just book something myself? I asked, already reaching for my wallet, still assuming this was some clerical hiccup, a dropped keystroke fixable with a credit card like most problems in life. She winced. We're completely full through the holiday, ma'am. I'm so sorry. There's a wait list. Behind me I heard my family arriving in the lobby, Lily's flip-flops slapping the marble. I turned around, ID still in hand. And here's the detail I'll carry to my grave, nobody asked what was wrong. Sit with that for a second. You see your daughter, your sister, standing at a front desk with her suitcase while a clerk apologizes to her, and you don't ask what's wrong? You don't ask because you already know. Surprise makes a sound, I've heard it plenty in conference rooms when data goes sideways. That lobby had none of it. My father found something riveting on his phone. My mother fussed over Lily's hat with tremendous concentration. Grant studied the ice in his drink like it owed him money. The only one who looked straight at me was Chloe, and she was smiling, the smile of someone whose plan has just clicked into place. She strolled across the lobby unhurried, sunglasses shoved up into her blown-out hair, drink with a little paper umbrella in hand. My big sister, 38 years old, had been waiting for this moment the way I wait for trial results. "Oh no," she said in a voice made entirely of frosting, "was there a mix-up?" "There's no room for me, Chloe," I said. She sipped her drink, and then she said it, each word set down like a fork at a table already set for company. "Well, we booked rooms for me, my husband, and my daughter. We're the actual family." The fountain kept trickling. Somewhere a bellhop wheeled a cart of someone else's luggage, someone whose family had actually counted heads. I looked at my mother. "Chloe, honey," Mom started, and I watched that sentence die right there. That was the entire rescue attempt, half a name and a trailing off. My father never once looked up from his phone, and his silence was the loudest sound in the room. I've spent my career watching how people react when a result comes back bad. There's a moment everyone decides who they're going to be. This was that moment, and everyone in my family made their choice. So I made mine too. I squared my shoulders, gripped my suitcase handle, and looked at my sister without raising my voice so much as half a note. "Then I'll leave." That's all I said. Chloe blinked. She'd rehearsed for tears, or begging, or some scene she could retell later at brunch, and I'd given her nothing to perform against. I walked past the fountain, through the revolving door, and out into the flat white heat of Florida. Behind me I heard Lily's small voice ask, "Where's Aunt Helen going?" Nobody teaches you where to drive after your family tells you exactly what you are. I pointed the rental car south down Gulf Boulevard, windows down, because I needed noise that wasn't coming from inside my own head. The phone started buzzing before I'd even cleared the resort's palm trees. "Mom. Mom. Chloe. Dad." Dad, who hadn't called me unprompted since roughly the Obama administration. Mom again. By the first red light there were 6 missed calls. By the bridge at Indian Rocks Beach, 17. I let them rattle around in the cup holder like angry bees trapped in a jar. Around 5, I passed a motel straight out of another decade, white cinder block, turquoise doors, a hand-painted sign with a seagull on it, the Gull Cottage. A vacancy light half burned out, flickering back to life. The owner was a woman in her 70s, reading glasses on a chain, a half-finished crossword on the counter. Yes, she had a room. $42 a night, and she apologized for it, the holiday, she explained. She ran my card, my name embossed right on it, and slid a real brass key across the counter, heavy, stamped with a 7. It felt like the first honest transaction of the entire day. Room 7 had a mattress that sagged in the middle, an air conditioner with a smoker's cough, and a balcony the size of an ironing board with an unobstructed view of the Gulf of Mexico. I sat out there and watched the water turn gold while my phone climbed to 23 missed calls. Then I finally played my mother's first voicemail, and something cold threaded through my chest. There was no apology anywhere in it, just her event planning voice pulled tight. "Helen, call us back before dinner. It's important." Before dinner. Why before dinner? I sat with a gas station iced tea and worked through the rest of them, one after another, like depositions. Voicemail 3, "Helen, this is very embarrassing for everyone." Embarrassing for everyone. Voicemail 5, "My mother again, brighter now, and scarier for it, sweetheart, we can fix this, there's a rollaway. Chloe says Lily's room has a daybed." A daybed. In the child's room. Voicemail 8 was my father, 6 seconds of throat clearing, then, "Call your mother." Chloe never called, Chloe texted, because texts don't require a tone of voice. "Stop being dramatic. Come back before you ruin this." I read that one twice. Ruin this. Not I'm sorry. Not I don't know what happened with the booking. Ruin this, as though there were some delicate structure I was threatening simply by refusing to sleep on a daybed like a visiting cousin. By sunset the counter read 47 missed calls. Sit with that number the way I did, because it's a strange one. People don't call 47 times in an afternoon to say they're sorry. Sorry has no deadline. Sorry can wait until morning, it usually does. People call 47 times when something they urgently need is on fire and that fire has a schedule. Every voicemail circled the same drain: come back tonight, be at dinner, wear something nice, we'll sort out the room situation later, just show up. Not one of them said the word sorry. And not one of them explained why tonight mattered so badly. On that little ironing board balcony, the sky slid from golden to bruised purple, and I turned the question over like a lab result that refused to make sense. Something was arriving that night. Something they needed me physically present for. I had no idea what. I found out at 8 o'clock. While my phone kept buzzing itself into a frenzy, I let myself do something I hadn't allowed in years. I went back through the archive. Christmas 6 years earlier. I was 29, delayed out of Logan by a snowstorm, texting updates the whole flight like a diligent employee. By the time I walked into my parents' living room, the family photo had already been taken. Matching plaid pajamas, a hired photographer, everyone arranged by the fireplace. Nobody had mentioned a photographer to me. "We'll Photoshop you in," Grant said, not even glancing up from his phone. They never did. That photo hung over my parents' mantel for years. 11 smiling relatives, and know me. Every Christmas I hung my coat beneath it and said nothing. Or my cousin's wedding, for years back. I flew in red-eyed from a conference in Denver, gift in hand, and got seated at table 9, next to the kitchen doors, beside a hospice chaplain and the DJ's wife. Chloe, Grant, and my parents sat at table 1, under the chandelier. "The Ashfords are a family unit," my mother explained afterward, gently, like she was correcting a point of grammar. And here's what I finally understood on that motel balcony, 35 years old, watching pelicans glide home in formation. Every one of those incidents, I had translated on their behalf. Snowstorm. Seating software glitch. Hotel error. I was fluent in it, turning cruelty into logistics, spite into weather. It was the unpaid family job nobody ever thanked me for, interpreter. And the difference that night wasn't that they'd finally gone too far. The lobby was simply the same old sentence, spoken plainly for once. The difference was me. Somewhere between the fountain and room 7, the interpreter had quietly resigned, and none of us, least of all me, knew who I'd be without her. At exactly 8, the phone lit up again, and this time the screen read, "Grandpa Walter." I answered before the second ring, the way I've answered that man my whole life. My grandfather has a voice like a hand resting on your shoulder. Slow, level, sanded smooth by 84 years of Ohio winters and sawdust. "Hi, Grandpa. Happy birthday week." A pause, long even for him. Then, "I did something foolish tonight. Wanted to surprise everybody. I called the front desk and asked them to send a key lime pie up to every Mercer room in the hotel, one for your folks, one for your sister and Grant, even a little one for Lily's room." I closed my eyes. I knew what was coming before he said it. "The girl at the desk was very helpful," he went on, level as a carpenter's level. "Read me the list. 4 rooms." I had her read it twice. Helen figured I was going deaf. The gulf kept folding and unfolding against the sand below my balcony. "There's no room under your name, Helen. My granddaughter, the one flying the farthest. Tell me why." And there it was. The whole family in one hand, the truth in the other, and 85 years of that man's heart caught in between. Because make no mistake, this is what every one of those 47 calls had really been about. Not me. Him. He was arriving at the resort for his own birthday week, and the family photo had a hole in it, and their one hope was to patch that hole before the man looking at the picture noticed. He'd noticed. He'd noticed by pi. "Grandpa," I said, and stopped, because I understood that whatever came next couldn't be unsaid. Let me pause right there, phone warm against my ear, the truth sitting in my mouth. If you've ever held that phone and had to decide whether to shield people who never once shielded you, tell me in the comments what you chose. I read every one of them. And if this story feels a little too familiar, hit subscribe now, because what my grandfather did next, nobody in my family saw coming. I decided, on the balcony of a $42 motel room, that I was finished interpreting. But that I wasn't about to turn prosecutor either. He'd asked why. He deserved the answer, plain and unembellished, nothing more. There was no room for me, I said. Chloe made the bookings back in the spring. When I asked at the desk, she told me the rooms were for her, Grant, and Lily. She said they were the actual family. So I left. I'm at a small motel down the beach. I'm fine, Grandpa. I promise I'm fine. No editorializing, no 20-year backstory. Just facts, delivered the way I present them to a review board. The silence on the line stretched long enough that I checked to see if the call had dropped. When he finally spoke, his voice hadn't gotten louder, it had gotten quieter, and with my grandfather, quieter is the direction that matters. She said that? The actual family? Yes, sir. Another silence. Then he said something that rearranged everything in my head. Helen. Who do you think is paying for that hotel? I said nothing, because the napkin math from every one of those Thanksgivings was suddenly solving itself, line by line, at terrible speed. The rooms, he said. The flights. The cabana your brother-in-law's drinking under right now. Friday's dinner. It's my birthday, sweetheart. I bought my own party. I bought the whole week. He let that sit a beat. The actual family, he repeated, flat, like a man reading off a defect report. Then, text me the name of your motel. Don't tell anybody I called. The line went quiet, and I sat in the dark, pelicans long gone, tide coming in, holding the first piece of an answer I'd spent my whole life avoiding. At 9, headlights swept across the Gull Cottage parking lot, and a sand-colored 2009 Buick rolled to a stop beneath the Seagull sign. My grandfather climbed out slowly, the way he does everything now, pressed shirt button to the collar in 90-degree heat, and stood a moment taking in the place. The cinder block, the buzzing vacancy sign, the turquoise doors. I came down the outside stairs, and he watched me the whole way and didn't hug me. That's not our language. He looked at me the way he'd once studied a load-bearing wall, checking for cracks, then nodded toward the plastic chairs outside my door. We sat a while. He said nothing, and let the Gulf do the talking. Then, don't polish it for me. I've had a belly full of polish. Tell me straight. So I told him straight. The April call, all set with the smiling sun. The meeting I'd rearranged. The clerk typing slower and slower. 4 rooms and a stroller closet. The frosting voice. The actual family. My own short goodbye and the revolving door. I kept my voice level the whole way through, and he listened the way he reads a contract, no nodding, no wincing, all of it filing away somewhere permanent behind his eyes. When I finished, his jaw worked once, twice, like he was chewing something with a bone still in it. The AC unit in room 6 rattled on. Somewhere down the beach, early fireworks popped and quit. Then my grandfather asked me one question, and it had nothing to do with the room. How long, he said, still watching the water, has it been like this? And God help me, I didn't say a word. That was the loudest answer I've ever given anyone. He sat with my silence a long time, 84 years old, hands folded, watching the last light drain off the water, and I would have paid anything not to know what he was feeling, because whatever it was, I'd caused it by telling him the truth, and the interpreter in me kept twitching toward her old desk. He finally stood, joints announcing themselves, and asked to see the room. Humor an old builder. So I showed him room 7. He took it in the way he takes in everything. The sagging mattress, the cough-drop air conditioner, the water stain shaped like Ohio on the ceiling, the brass key sitting on the dresser with its honest number 7. He picked up the key, weighed it in his palm. "You paid for this?" "I always pay for my own room, Grandpa." It came out of me without thinking, and I heard exactly how much bigger it was than the motel. He nodded slowly, still holding the key. 40 years I built houses for people, he said. You know what I learned? Everybody loves a house. Almost nobody wants to pay for one. He set the key down gently, square on the dresser, like he was laying a cornerstone. That right there is the most expensive thing anybody in this family owns, and you're the only one who ever bought one. He walked to the door, and at the threshold turned back. Lunch tomorrow, noon, at the resort. Not for them. For me. Wear the dress you bought. He was in the Buick before I could answer. I stood in room 7 with my heart going like a trial with early results, staring at a $2 brass key that had somehow just become the most important object in my life. I walked back into the Sandpiper Grand at noon the next day on my grandfather's arm, in the key lime dress, and got to watch something I'll never forget, my family's faces doing math. Half a second, I clocked it like a stopwatch. Half a second of total system failure. My mother's mouth opening around nothing. Chloe's drink pausing midair. Grant recalculating his entire posture. Then the performance switched on like stadium floodlights. There she is, my mother cried, arms flung wide, party voice at full volume. We were worried sick. You just vanished. I got a hug that was mostly fingernails and perfume. Grant pumped my hand like I was a blood donor. Chloe air-kissed somewhere east of my cheek and said, cute dress, through teeth whitened past the point of argument. Within 90 seconds there was a chair for me, conjured out of thin air, a place setting, a menu, sparkling water, still water. Would I like the grouper? The grouper's wonderful. Nobody mentioned the room. Nobody mentioned the lobby, or the calls, or the label that had been hanging over my name since the day before. The table talk was sunscreen and dolphins. Lily showed me a shell. I sat in the middle of all that warmth like a scientist who's finally isolated her variable. So this is what it looks like when they need me visible. I didn't perform back, and I didn't sulk. I answered pleasantly and watched, the way I watch Data, and one seat over, my grandfather was doing exactly the same thing over his iced tea, quiet as an audit. 2 auditors at one table. Only one of them knew the other was already deep in the books, and neither of them was me. If you've never watched a quiet man dismantle a family with polite questions, I hope you never get the chance. It started over key lime pie, mid-dessert, casual as sunscreen. Shame about the rooms, Grandpa said to no one in particular. Big group like this, Chloe, you booked back in March, didn't you? A beat. The hotel must have dropped Helen's, Chloe said, smooth as her frosting voice, sunglasses still pushed into her hair indoors. It's been a nightmare, honestly, holiday week. Said my grandfather, and let the lie sit there in the sun where everyone could see it. Then, mild as milk. Grant. How's the consulting? Still busy? Grant lit up the way he does whenever the topic is Grant. Great quarter. Big things moving. Got a client in logistics. Which firm is that? Grandpa asked, friendly as ever, and I watched a 40-year-old man realize he'd never prepared a name. The sentence died somewhere over the dessert cart. Confidentiality, Grant finally said, tapping the side of his nose. My grandfather said again and cleared his throat, and I realized I was watching a man check load-bearing walls one knock at a time, listening for the hollow spots. My father got a knock too. Club treating you well, Frank? Dues went up again, I hear. My father, who has never once discussed a bill in my presence, said dues were dues and laughed a laugh with nothing behind it. Chloe's hand drifted to her wedding ring, twisting it round, and for one strange second I felt something for her that was almost pity. Then lunch ended, and my grandfather folded his napkin, thanked everyone, and smiled. Friday night. My birthday dinner. All of us. That was all. So why did it land on the table like a subpoena? Thursday afternoon my mother showed up at the Gull cottage. She stood in the doorway of room 7, purse clutched in both hands like a shield, taking in the cinder block and the sagging bed with an expression she'd have denied under oath. She hadn't come to apologize, I knew that within one sentence, because the sentence was, "You've made your point, Helen." I let it pass. She perched on the edge of the bed like it was a wet park bench and got down to it. "Friday is your grandfather's night. Please, please don't make waves at dinner. You know how he gets ideas about people." I asked her calmly what had actually happened with the booking, and I watched my mother choose truth over comfort for once, though only because she assumed the truth would win me over. "Chloe made the reservations in March. She said you'd probably be working anyway, you're always working, sweetheart. And your father and I thought," she trailed off, "then we thought it wasn't worth upsetting her over a maybe." There it was, complete at last. Not an oversight, a decision in March, a lie in April, a lie again in June, and my parents' signatures in the margins in invisible ink, the kind they've always used. "Keeping Chloe happy keeps the peace." That was the house I grew up in, finally spoken aloud in a motel that smelled like salt and disinfectant. "I already left quietly once this week, Mom," I said. "I'm coming to dinner." She looked at me a long moment, something crossing her face that might have been fear and might have been respect, and left before I could name it. At the door she paused. "Wear something nice," my mother said. "Some songs only know one verse." Thursday evening my grandfather picked me up in the Buick, and we walked the hard sand along the Titterline, shoes in hand, like it was 40 years earlier and he was teaching me to find sand dollars. He talked about Ruth. How she kept score at gin rummy in a spiral notebook and only cheated on his birthday so he'd win, how during her final month in the hospital she worried about everyone else's parking validation. Then he stopped walking, faced the water, and I watched him decide to say what he'd actually driven over to say. "After your grandmother died, I did my grieving with a checkbook. Your dad was lost," Chloe cried at me, "and it was easier to wire money than to look at either one of them. Every year it got a little easier. You know what I told myself? I'm helping." The waves kept arriving, patient, like they had all the time in the world. He didn't. I didn't build a family, Helen. I bought one. I've heard my grandfather angry maybe twice in my life. This was worse, this was a man reading his own inspection report. I told him then about the hospital room 10 years back, the promise I'd never spoken aloud to anyone. Grandma Ruth's hand in mine, papery and sure. "Promise me you'll keep showing up for this family." So I had, Christmas after Christmas, table 9 after table 9. He listened, then shook his head slowly. "Ruthie said the family," he said. "She never said the show." I stood there with my shoes in my hand while that sentence rearranged 10 years of my life. Then he squeezed my shoulder once, walked toward the Buick, and said over his shoulder, "Tomorrow night I'm giving my birthday speech. I've been writing it for 30 years. The private dining room at the Sandpiper Grand had white tablecloths, Gulf view windows going pink with sunset, and a slideshow my mother had put together, looping on a screen near the cake table. I stood with a glass of sparkling water and watched about 60 photographs of my family cycle past. I appeared in 2 of them. 2. One was my own college graduation, and even there I was at the edge of the frame, half-cropped, like weather that had drifted into the shot by accident. Nobody else seemed to notice, which was, of course, the entire point of my existence in that family. Dinner was grouper and compliments. Grant toasted the best grandpa in the world with a catch in his voice that switched on and off like a light. Then, between dinner and cake, my grandfather stood, and didn't raise his glass. "Sit down, Grant," he said, mild. Grant sat. "I'm 85 today. I've been rich for about 40 of those years, and a fool for about 10 of them," and tonight those two facts stop living under the same roof. Total silence. Even the slideshow seemed to hold its breath. Then my grandfather began reciting from memory, in the flat, unhurried voice of a man reading an invoice line by line. Frank, Carol, I paid off your mortgage the year Lily was born. I pay the club $11,000 a year. I pay for Scottsdale. $9,000, wired like clockwork on the first of every month. My father went the color of the tablecloth. Chloe, Grant, the down payment on the Colonial was mine. $7,500 a month, that's the consulting, son. There's no logistics client. There never was. And this week, these rooms, those flights, that grouper, this cake, mine. He looked around the table slowly, like a man walking a job site. Then he turned to Chloe, and his voice didn't rise at all, which is exactly what made it terrible. You told my granddaughter she wasn't the actual family. You were more right than you knew, sweetheart. None of this was real. I paid for all of it. Nobody moved. Behind me the sunset kept going, pink and gold and indifferent. My grandfather stood at the head of that table with 50 years of unspoken math finally out in the open, and he wasn't finished. He picked up his water glass, looked at it, set it back down, and said the sentence. As of the 1st of next month, it stops. All of it. The transfers, the dues, the cards, the arrangements, every penny. It didn't sound like a sentence. It sounded like a foundation cracking. I'm 85 years old, he went on into the silence, and this week, at that front desk, I finally got a good look at what my money built. A hotel with no room in it for the only one of you who ever tried to pay her own way. My mother made a sound like a hiccup. Grant said, Walter, and my grandfather just looked at him, and whatever Grant meant to say went back wherever it had come from. It was Chloe who cracked. Chloe, whose entire architecture had just been read aloud like a bill of lading. The tears were fast and real, I'd never seen real ones on her before, and they're different, uglier. Then, through them, she found the oldest exit in the building. She turned on me. You did this, she said, shaking, mascara sliding. You've been planning this. You and your sad little motel and your sad little wounded face. You did this. And my grandfather said, Helen. The whole room turned. He was looking at me steadily, both hands flat on the tablecloth. Did I get it wrong? He asked me, in front of all of them. You know these people. You've been covering for them your whole life. Tell me if I got it wrong. And there it was, the job opening. Interpreter, 1 vacancy, immediate start. 35 years of it's fine, it was a misunderstanding, they didn't mean it, rose up my throat on pure muscle memory. I looked at my mother's pleading face and I said, No, Grandpa. You didn't. I want to be honest about what that room felt like afterward, because if you came here for fireworks, I don't have any. It felt like the moment after a car wreck, that ringing quiet where everyone's testing whether their hands still work. My father stood up too fast, his voice sliding from anger into fear inside a single sentence. Dad, be reasonable. We have obligations. You could hear the exact syllable where he stopped defending his pride and started counting his bills. Grant kept muttering okay, okay, okay to nobody, palms up, like a man patting an invisible dog. My mother wept without sound, which is how she handles everything difficult. And Lily stood by the cake table holding a shell she'd brought to show everyone, watching her mother cry, and that was the only part of the whole night that actually hurt. A waitress, bless her, knelt down and led Lily off toward the lobby aquarium. I didn't gloat, I want that on record. There was no vindication in my chest, no scoreboard lighting up. There was just a low, sad hum, like standing in the house she grew up in on the day the movers finish emptying it out. My grandfather picked up the cake knife, looked at the untouched birthday cake, and set the knife back down. Happy birthday to me, he said quietly, to no one. Then he offered me his arm, and we walked out past the slideshow, still looping, still glowing, still missing me. In the Buick, in the dark, he stared through the windshield a while. "Next month I'm redoing things," he said finally. "Papers, lawyers. I'll want you at a table one more time, Helen." I said okay, because you say okay to that man. I had no idea what I was agreeing to. I flew home to Boston that Sunday, and the siege started Monday morning. Understand, for 20 years my phone had barely rung with family on the other end. Now it wouldn't stop. My father called 3 times that first week. My father, who I'd genuinely assumed had lost my number, and every call had the same shape, 5 minutes of small talk, then the pivot, gentle as a crowbar. "Have you talked to your grandfather? He listens to you." My Aunt Peg, pulled off the bench for the occasion, left rambling voicemails about how family is family is family, a sentence that gets less true with every repetition. My mother switched to care packages of guilt, photos of Lily at swim class captioned she misses her aunt. Not one message in 3 weeks asked how I was doing. Not one asked what it had felt like at that front desk, or in room 7, or in that dining room with every eye on me. Every arrow, however it was fletched, flew the same direction: talk to Walter, soften Walter, fix it, Helen. It was the interpreter job again, same desk, fancier title. Only now the client list was desperate. Meanwhile the collapse rolled on schedule, in little bulletins I never asked for. The club card got declined at lunch in front of Dad's golf group. Peg called that one a tragedy. I heard it as physics. The Colonial quietly went on the market with a realtor who specialized in transitions. A leased SUV got returned. And late one night, alone in my paid-off kitchen, I finally cried. Not over the money, and not exactly over them. I cried for the family I'd spent 35 years believing was just one more good deed away. That family, it turned out, had never existed. I was grieving someone who'd never been born. Quick question, from my kitchen table in Boston to yours: if the people who'd left you off the list suddenly needed you back on it, would you pick up the phone? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to know, because what my grandfather asked of me next was heavier than anything my sister said in that lobby. Stay with me. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the moment. 3 weeks and 2 days after the birthday dinner, my sister showed up in the lobby of my office building in Boston. I nearly walked right past her. Chloe without her usual polish is a different person: hair in a plain elastic, a wrinkled rain jacket, actual weather in her eyes. She'd flown up on a basic economy ticket just to see me. That alone told me the world had ended. We sat on a bench by the elevators, and for maybe the first time in 20 years, my sister told me true things. The house was on the market. Grant was updating his resume, a phrase she said like a foreign word she'd only just learned. Lily's school had her on a payment plan now. Then she looked down at her hands and said the truest thing I've ever heard come out of her mouth. "I haven't paid for a single thing since I was 22, Helen. Not a phone bill. I don't," her voice cracked into something real, "I don't know how to do what you do." For one second I saw her at 16, braiding my hair before school because Mom was busy with the caterers, and something in my chest went soft toward my sister for the first time since that lobby. 1 second. Then she reached over, took my hand like a business partner, and made her pitch. "Talk to Grandpa. Get him to turn it back on. He'll do it for you. And I swear, Helen, things will change. You'll be included, the holidays, the photos, all of it. You'll be family. I'll make sure." I sat with that offer under the elevator lights. Then I said quietly, "Chloe, you just tried to sell me the one thing that was supposed to be free." She left without looking back. My phone buzzed before she'd even cleared the revolving door. "Grandpa Walter. Come down Saturday," he said, no preamble. He was born before preamble existed. "Bring nothing. My lawyer's drawn up papers, and I want you sitting across from me when I sign them." I asked what kind of papers. "The permanent kind," he said, and hung up, because he was also born before goodbyes. So Saturday morning I flew Boston to Tampa for the second time that summer, and did what I always do on planes: inventory. Somewhere over the Carolinas I laid my whole life out like a data set. One condo nearly paid off. One career built brick by brick with nobody handing me a ladder. One family currently in a controlled demolition. One 85-year-old grandfather in possession of a fortune, a guilty conscience, and my motel's address. I knew an offer was coming. You don't summon someone across 4 states to watch you sign paperwork unless that paperwork concerns them. Approvals are my profession. I know what a signing ceremony smells like. What I couldn't model, no matter how I ran the numbers, was the shape of the offer. And that uncertainty did something I wasn't proud to admit. It made me hope. Some old, unkillable version of me, the girl standing outside a fireplace photo she wasn't in, sat there at 30,000 feet hoping to finally be chosen. And the grown woman in the seat watched her hope and worried for her, because I'd learned things that summer about what being chosen costs in my family, and who ends up holding the bill. The plane came down over the Gulf, green and gold and patient. My grandfather was waiting at the curb in the Buick, engine running, window down. Good flight? Fine. Good, he said. Let's go rewrite the future. He wasn't smiling when he said it. My grandfather's house in Baird is 900 square feet from 1962, and he could buy the whole street with a phone call. We sat at his kitchen table, original Formica, gold-flecked, the same table where Ruth taught me gin rummy, and his lawyer, a courteous silver-haired man named Dale, laid folders out like place settings. Coffee in Ruth's cups, the ones with the cornflowers. Outside, a sprinkler ticked in circles. And then, in the same voice he'd used to order the grouper, my grandfather offered me the keys to everything, the proceeds of 40 years of Mercer Building Supply, the accounts, the properties, all of it folded into a trust. Me, trustee. Me, principal heir. Effective while he lived, ironclad once he wasn't. Your father, your mother, your sister, Grant, if they need something, they come to you. You decide what's real. You decide what gets funded, what gets rented, what gets earned. Dale slid the folder across the Formica and turned it to face me, the tab reading Helen R. Mercer in the typeface of things that can't be undone. You're the only one in this family who knows what $1's worth, my grandfather said. The only one who ever bought her own room. So I'm handing you the whole hotel. I want you to understand what that folder actually was. It was the lobby, reversed. It was every table 9, refunded with interest. It was my sister standing at a front desk for the rest of her life while I decided whether there was a room for her. The girl beneath the fireplace photo stood up inside me and reached for the pen with both hands. Chosen, in writing, notarized. My grandfather watched me with those load-bearing eyes, and Dale uncapped the pen and set it on the folder, and the sprinkler kept ticking, and nobody said anything, because both men reasonably believed there was nothing left to decide. I'm going to tell you the truth about the next 5 minutes, because I promised you honesty, and I'm not proud of every second of it. I wanted it. God, I wanted it. Not even mainly the money, though let's not pretend I'm a saint, the money too. But what it meant. Safety so complete you never check a price tag again. And underneath that safety, something older and hungrier, the scoreboard, settled forever. Chloe would have to call me. Chloe would have to be nice to me, carefully, professionally nice, every Christmas for the rest of her life. My mother would ask whether there was room in the budget, and I'd get to be gracious about it. I sat at that gold-flecked table and ran the whole beautiful simulation, and it tasted like key lime. Then, because analyzing things is the closest thing I have to prayer, I kept running it. Year 2. Year 5. My phone ringing on the 1st of every month. Grant's newest venture needing just a bridge, just this once. My mother's voice, you know how your sister is. Every holiday turning into a budget meeting. Every gift arriving with a line item number, the way everything in our family always had, except now I'd be the one stamping the invoices. I looked at the folder with my name on the tab and finally saw its real shape. It wasn't a throne. It was a teller's window with a nicer chair behind the glass, for the rest of my life. Me, the new Walter. The next envelope. My grandfather had spent 30 years buying himself a family, and it had cost him that family. And here he was, with all the love in the world, offering to sell me the same store. My hand was on the pen. That's how close it got. My hand was actually resting on the pen. And then I heard it again. Ruthie said the family. She never said the show. And I set the pen back down on the formica. No, Grandpa. The sprinkler ticked twice before anyone breathed. Dale looked at my grandfather. My grandfather never took his eyes off me. No. Not this, I said, and my voice stayed level, which surprised even me, given what it was carrying. You're not wrong that somebody should hold this family accountable. You're wrong about what it would cost me to be the one holding the ledger. If I sign that, I'm not your granddaughter anymore. I'm the bank. They'll smile at me exactly the way they smiled at you. Did you like it? 40 years of it? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. So here's what I want instead, I said, and asked Dale for his legal pad. And at Ruth's kitchen table, at 35 years old, I drew up my own inheritance and gave it away. 1. Take my name off everything, the will, the trust, all of it. Not a dollar comes to me, not now, not later. It has to be real, Grandpa, and it's only real if I can never profit from having said any of this. Dale started writing. 2. An education trust for Lily, college, trade school, whatever she wants. With the bank itself as trustee. Not me, not my parents, nobody with our last name anywhere near it, so no one can ever make her audition for it. My voice caught there, just slightly, and I let it. 3. A fixed, irrevocable annuity for my parents. Modest. Enough to grow old on, not enough to perform on. They're your son and his wife, nobody's sleeping in a car, but the show is over. And 4, I looked at him, the rest is yours, and you're going to spend some of it on yourself, for once. Whatever's left goes to a scholarship in Grandma's name, for kids paying their own tuition. Kids who buy their own rooms. The kitchen went very quiet. You're turning down millions, Dale said, not unkindly, a man confirming the dosage. I know exactly what I'm turning down, I said, and to this day it's the truest sentence I've ever spoken, because I could feel it all leaving me as I said it. The safety, the scoreboard, the notarized version of Chosen, the last old daydream of the girl outside the photo, all of it sliding off the table like the tide pulling out. I've spent my whole life leaving quietly, I said. This time I'm staying, but not for the money. For the first conversation this family's ever had that nobody paid for. My grandfather looked at me a long time. Then Walter Mercer, 85 years old, put a hand over his mouth, and his shoulders shook once, twice, and I studied the cornflowers on Ruth's cup because some things you don't audit. You said you bought a family, I told him once he could hear me again. So stop buying, Grandpa, and let's see who actually stays. He signed it my way, every page. And the last thing he did was slide Ruth's cup across the formica to my side of the table. Inheritance, he said. It sits on my kitchen shelf in Boston right now. It's worth about $4. It's the most expensive thing I own, aside from one brass key. That night I didn't stay at his place, and I certainly didn't try the Sandpiper Grand. I drove the rental down Gulf Boulevard to the Gull Cottage, and the owner glanced up from her crossword and smiled at me like a regular. Room 7 was free, and I paid for it with my own card, and the brass key sat heavy in my hand, and all of it felt like ritual. I sat on that ironing board balcony with my feet up on the rail while the Gulf went dark, and I finally understood what I'd been circling ever since that lobby. I was never left out of that family for lack of trying. No amount of showing up was ever going to buy me a seat, because I was never being priced, I was being quarantined. I was the control group. Living proof that a person could stand on her own 2 feet without being propped up. And every room I paid for embarrassed every room they hadn't. You can't have proof like that sitting at table 1. It ruins the show. 20 years I'd been applying for a position that was never actually open. And that night, on a $42 balcony, I finally withdrew my application. My phone buzzed one last time. Chloe, I hope you're happy. I looked at it a while, then set the phone face down next to the brass key and watched the water. And for the first time in my life, the silence coming off my family didn't feel like a wound. It felt like a door. I closed it gently. That was a year ago. Here's the accounting, because you've earned it. The Colonial sold in 4 months. Chloe, Grant, and Lily now live in a rented 2-bedroom on the unglamorous side of Columbus, and Grant works the parts counter at a marina, boats at last, professionally. His first real paycheck arrived at age 41. Chloe works the front desk at a dental office. I know because one afternoon last spring my phone lit up with a photo, no caption, no message. Her first pay stub. I studied it a long while, everything it said and didn't say, and wrote back, frame it. She never replied, but she didn't delete me either. In my family, that's not nothing. That's a brick. You can't rebuild a house with one brick, but you can't rebuild it without one either. My parents sold the big house and moved into a condo near the club they can no longer afford to enter. The annuity lands on the 1st of every month, exactly enough, exactly as designed. My mother sent me a birthday card in March, under the printed verse she'd added, in her own handwriting, one line, "You always did land on your feet. Love, Mom." For her, that's practically a confession. I keep it in a drawer, not on a shelf. Progress, filed appropriately. The old current running through that family didn't disappear, in case you're wondering. Money still does the talking there. At a cousin's wedding last fall, the seating chart told the same old story, and I was still at table 9. The difference is I ate the cake, danced once with a retired chaplain, left early, and slept 9 hours in a room with my own name on the folio. The chart was never mine to fix. It never was. Lily's trust sits at the bank, growing quietly, waiting for a girl who will never have to smile her way through tuition. It's the one document in this whole saga with no strings attached anywhere, my fingerprints are all over the design of it, and my name is nowhere in it, which is exactly as it should be. The Ruth Mercer Scholarship funded its first 3 students back in January. My grandfather reads me their thank you letters over the phone and blames his allergies for his voice cracking. And every Sunday at 4, Walter Mercer calls me, and we talk about nothing, pelicans, gin rummy, whether Dale dyes his hair. It's the richest conversation in my week, because it's the one thing left in this family that nobody, anywhere, is paying for. Last month I flew down and spent a weekend at the Gull Cottage, just me. The owner has my crossword habit figured out by now, she saves me the Saturday puzzle. Room 7 was free. It always seems to be free when I show up, which I've decided not to look into too closely. I set the brass key on the nightstand beside Ruth's cornflower cup, I travel with both now, go ahead and laugh, and sat on that little balcony watching the tide roll in over the sandbars, thinking about what I'd tell you if you were sitting in the other plastic chair. It's this, real family, it turns out, is whoever's still at the table once nobody's fighting over the check. And nobody. Not a sister, not a seating chart, not a front desk in Florida, can lock you out of a life you paid for yourself. That's my story. One missing reservation, one quiet sentence at a birthday dinner, and a brass key I'll keep forever. If someone keeps insisting you're not the real family, maybe the truest thing you can do is pay for your own room, and sleep well in it. If this story reached you at the right moment, pass it along to someone who needs it. Drop a comment, and subscribe.